You clicked for mob meltdowns. Here's proof we deliver, now. Watch 100 bosses flee into woods like spooked deer. Hear a Don bury himself on tapes, insulting his underboss. See an undercover named Donnie Brasco walk straight inside. Then, a record airport heist unravels over fur coats and cars. And yes, we'll show how tax forms crushed Al Capone. If they're criminal masterminds, why keep ledgers, brag, or call payphones? In the next minutes, 39 disasters, each crazier than last. Stay, and I'll prove crime's worst enemy was ego, every time. Appalachian meeting disaster. 100 bosses run into the woods. Police swarmed a country estate. Mob bosses sprinted terrified. In 1957, Appalachian New York hosted history's dumbest retreat. Troopers noticed luxury cars, set roadblocks, and started questioning. Joseph Barbara's lawn became a runway for fleeing suits. Vito Genovese, Carlo Gambino, and others scattered through woods. Agents seized guest lists, cash, and cards connecting networks. Suddenly, a secret national hierarchy wasn't secret to Washington. Courtrooms later echoed with names first collected that afternoon. A favored dash triggered indictments and reshaped alliances nationwide. Gotti spilled secrets in bugged Ravenite apartment upstairs. Secret tapes sank John Gotti long before the jury. The FBI bugged an upstairs apartment above the Ravenite home. He thought the club downstairs was safe from microphones. Agents listened to strategy, murders, and insults toward allies. Those recordings followed him into federal court in 1992. Sammy Gravano heard blame shifting, then changed his future. Meetings relocated, but The Wire kept catching careless confidence. Little Italy's streets carried rumors. The tapes carried proof. A favored hangout became the echo chamber that doomed. Donnie Brasco infiltration. Bonanos welcomed an FBI undercover. An undercover name unraveled a crew from the inside. In New York, agent Joseph Pistone became Donnie Brasco. He befriended Lefty Ruggiero and Sonny Black Napolitano. Years of coffee shops, bars, and favors built trust. Plans for Florida operation pushed him deeper than expected. When the Bureau pulled him out, consequences hit fast. Napolitano paid with his life after sponsoring the imposter. Court cases multiplied, using tapes and introductions he facilitated. A borrowed name became the fuse that split loyalties. Lufthansa heist crew flaunted cash and fur coats immediately. A record airport heist unraveled because flaunting never hides. In 1978, JFK cargo vanished under Jimmy Burke's direction. Crew members bought mink coats and new cars immediately. Investigators noticed purchases, followed girlfriends, and found apartments. Stax Edwards bungled cleanup, leaving a truck for detectives. Burke started eliminating witnesses, deepening attention rather than safety. Henry Hill began cooperating, telling stories that connected dots. Bodies and bills surfaced, pointing right back to Queens. The score of millions became a spotlight none survived. Al Capone nailed by taxes and his own ledgers. Chicago's biggest boss fell not to bullets, but bookkeeping. In 1931, Al Capone faced federal tax charges. An accountant's ledger tied gambling profits to his income. Treasury agent Frank Wilson patiently traced names and numbers. Witness Leslie Shumway identified entries from Hawthorne Smoke Shop. Capone pleaded ill health. Judges cared more about records. A criminal empire met its match in dull arithmetic. Prison at Alcatraz followed, and Chicago politics quietly shifted. Sometimes the smallest notebook outweighs the largest entourage completely. Castellano's kitchen was bugged, serving the FBI everything. The mansion's kitchen whispered secrets into federal microphones nightly. On Staten Island, Paul Castellano trusted home over clubs. Agents slipped in, planted bugs, and waited over dinners. Conversations covered unions, construction, and sensitive internal matters. The tapes mapped relationships that paper could never diagram. When leadership changed, those recordings still guided indictments. Castellano preferred steak. Prosecutors preferred audio from his kitchen. Home felt safer, but walls worked for someone else. A private dining room became the government's best booth. Valachi breaks omerta, publicly exposes Cosa Nostra structure. A frightened soldier publicly named a secret organization nationwide. In 1963, Joseph Valachi testified before a Senate committee. He described structures, rituals, and bosses previously whispered cautiously. Vito Genovese loomed over his story inside federal prison. The term Cosa Nostra reached headlines and everyday conversations. Law enforcement built charts using names he finally confirmed. Some questioned motives, but the blueprint proved extremely actionable. Families adjusted operations, fearing more defections and surveillance. One man's fear redrew maps on every detective's wall. Tony Ducks Corralo's bugged Jaguar doomed the commission. A luxury car carried a microphone that wrecked careers. Lucchese boss Tony Corralo loved conversations during chauffeured rides. Agents secretly wired the Jaguar, capturing months of planning. He discussed the commission, disputes, and sensitive appointments casually. Those tapes landed center stage in the commission case. Christopher Furnari and others appeared frequently on recordings too. Cars seemed safe. Dashboards betrayed them without mercy later. Mob talk met upholstery, and upholstery had ears everywhere. A showroom purchase became a rolling grand jury invitation. Pizza Connection kept meticulous ledgers tying heroin money trails. Meticulous notebooks turned pizzerias into courtroom exhibits for months. Heroin money flowed through New York and pizza parlors. Sicilian bosses coordinated shipments with careful business records kept. Investigators mapped transfers from tiny shops to offshore accounts. Badalamenti and others faced a marathon trial in Manhattan. Ledgers linked deliveries, deposits, and coded communications for prosecutors. Jurors saw pizza boxes supporting international narcotics routes starkly. A casual slice hid diagrams of global greed beneath. The crusts were thin. The paper trail was thick. Bugsy Siegel opened the Flamingo early, a costly fiasco. A glamorous opening hemorrhaged money and patience immediately there. In Las Vegas, Bugsy Siegel unveiled the Flamingo before readiness. Rooms leaked, construction lagged, and gamblers stayed away early. With costs soaring, partners questioned his competence and honesty. The casino closed, then reopened after fixes and promotions. By then, patience among backers ran dangerously low already. In 1947, bullets ended Siegel's career in Beverly Hills. Las Vegas prospered later. His missteps still echo loudly. A rushed ribbon cutting became proof hype can't replace preparation. Dutch Schultz planned to kill Dewey. Commission killed him instead. A murder plot backfired before a trigger was pulled. Dutch Schultz targeted prosecutor Thomas Dewey in New York. The commission rejected the plan, fearing endless political heat. Schultz ignored warnings and raged about doing it anyway. Instead, assassins found him at the Palace Chop House, Newark. Mortally wounded, Schultz messaged while detectives leaned closer. The threat disappeared. The prosecutor kept tightening screws relentlessly. Allies saw what defying the commission really invited quickly. Ambition met discipline, and discipline handed out consequences immediately. Spilatro's hole-in-the-wall gang botched the Bertha's heist. A planned burglary turned into a parking lot roundup instead. In Las Vegas, Tony Spilatro oversaw the hole-in-the-wall gang. They targeted Bertha's gifts, expecting jewels and easy getaway. Metro detectives already watched, waiting with radios and cuffs. When walls cracked, alarms and officers arrived together fast. Multiple crew members were arrested at the scene immediately. Charges later wobbled, but reputations sank across town regardless. Spilatro's profile rose for all the wrong reasons, publicly. A signature method became the calling card for detectives. Sammy Gravano flipped after hearing Gotti trash him on tape. a right-hand man chose testimony over silence and loyalty. Sammy Gravano served as underboss to John Gotti. Previously, bureau recordings caught Gotti criticizing him and assigning blame. After hearing excerpts, Gravano agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. He detailed murders, rackets, and internal politics across years. Convictions followed, and the Gambino family lost momentum quickly. Some called betrayal. He called survival under impossible circumstances. Either way, the tapes forced a choice nobody expected. One afternoon listening changed New York's power landscape permanently. Angelo Quack Quack Ruggiero's endless phone chatter got bugged. Endless phone chatter invited microphones and prosecutors into conversations. Angelo Ruggiero, Gotti associate, loved talking on phones constantly. Investigators secured wiretaps and recorded hours of gossip daily. Discussions about narcotics created tension with his mentor immediately. The tapes became exhibits, linking conversations to broader schemes. Allies worried their names appeared on careless ramblings repeatedly. Phones looked convenient. They were doorways for surveillance instead. Soon, meetings moved, but the damage already spread widely. A nickname about talking became the reason people whispered. Joe Colombo courted TV cameras, invited heat, and a bullet. Spotlights brought trouble to a man comfortable with attention. Joe Colombo founded a public civil rights group in Brooklyn. Rallies drew cameras, celebrities, and curious politicians for speeches. At a Manhattan event, a gunman approached and opened fire. Colombo collapsed, surviving but never fully returning to power. The movement stalled as investigations tightened around associates nearby. Publicity once helpful now drew heat from every direction. The streets remembered the cameras and the sirens afterward. An open mic turned into an open invitation for chaos. Crazy Joe Gallo celebrated publicly at Umberto's, paid the price. A birthday dinner ended in shots on a crowded corner. Crazy Joe Gallo celebrated at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy. Tensions with rivals simmered after a violent earlier feud. Gunmen entered and chaos spread through tables and street. Witness accounts conflicted. The implications did not at all. Family members dragged him outside, pleading for help desperately. New York read the message. Truce had limits everywhere. Restaurants felt different afterward, even with fresh white tablecloths. Public celebrations can become checkmates when grudges linger long. Carmine Galante ate lunch with light security, never left alive. A backyard lunch ended with cigars and gunfire together. Carmine Galante dined at Joe and Mary's in Brooklyn. He favored espresso, outdoor tables, and a signature cigar. Sicilian bodyguards mysteriously stood back when assassins appeared suddenly. Bullets ended a reign that threatened established arrangements citywide. Photographs captured the cigar still clenched after death, chillingly. Investigators examined alliances between American and Sicilian factions closely. The patio scene became tabloid shorthand for Mafia upheaval. A sunny afternoon revealed storm clouds nobody ignored again. Toto Riina hid in Palermo for years. Routine gave him away. Decades underground ended with a quiet Palermo arrest finally. Toto Riina, capo of Corleonesi, evaded capture for years. Carabinieri tracked routines, drivers, and hidden apartments carefully, daily. The break came by following his driver's predictable routes. Arrest near his home showed protection was thinner than believed. Neighbors later spoke about a normal man with groceries. Behind that routine sat bombings and war across Sicily. The city exhaled while investigations widened around allies immediately. Sometimes simplicity cracks the armor. Complicated myths build around. Bernardo Provenzano's Pizzini notes led police straight to him. Handwritten notes betrayed a fugitive's carefully hidden network, ultimately. Bernardo Provenzano communicated through tiny folded messages called Pizzini. Couriers carried them between farms, churches, and rural hideouts. Analysts matched handwriting, codes, and recurring phrases patiently together. In 2006, Police closed in near Corleone countryside, quietly. Raids found shelters, documents, and another stack of messages. The old-fashioned system carried the weakness of paper permanence. A pencil ended what encrypted phones never started. There, low-tech secrecy left fingerprints on every unfolded edge eventually. Killing Falcone and Borsellino backfired, unleashing Italy's Maxi crackdown. Two assassinations triggered the harshest crackdown modern Italy saw. Judge Giovanni Falcone died in a highway bombing near Capaci. Weeks later, Paolo Borsellino was murdered in Palermo too. Public outrage filled streets, schools, and city squares everywhere. Parliament passed tougher laws, including strict prison regimes immediately. Investigators pressed pentiti, cooperating witnesses, for detailed testimony relentlessly. The Maxi trial legacy surged back with renewed force. Riena's capture came months after, reshaping balances across Sicily. Blood intended to intimidate instead galvanized an entire nation. Carmine Persico played lawyer at trial, earned 139 years. A mob boss defended himself, then collected a staggering sentence. In Manhattan federal court, Carmine Persico insisted on going pro se. He cross-examined agents and rivals, treating trial like neighborhood politics. Prosecutors stacked racketeering counts tied to extortion and conspiracy. Jurors watched theatrics, but paperwork and tapes carried heavier weight. When verdicts landed, the sentence stretched beyond a natural lifetime. Colombo family ranks scrambled, reading the courtroom turn like weather. Self-representation looked bold. It also removed convenient appeal arguments. He left the building a lawyer without clients, only years. Frank Calabrese Sr. confided to his son, who wore a wire. A prison conversation quietly planted the seed for a takedown. In federal custody, Frank Calabrese Sr. vented during family visits. His son, Frank Jr., had already contacted agents about cooperating. They arranged recordings from prison yards and monitored phone calls. Details about murders and extortion spilled across those hushed conversations. Investigators paired the tapes with testimony from Nicholas Calabrese. The operation earned a name Chicago would never forget again. Courtrooms revisited decades of violence through family voices and ledgers. A whispered trust turned into evidence stronger than neighborhood fear. Angiulo Brothers headquarters, above a tailor shop, got bugged. Boston's North End office became an unwilling broadcast booth overnight. The Angiulo brothers ran meetings above a busy tailor shop. With help from informants, agents slipped microphones into the ceiling. Conversations about loans, gambling, and discipline rolled for months. Names, collections, and coded phrases sounded less coded on playback. Transcripts reached federal prosecutors, then jurors across New England. Neighborhood legends met microphones, and legends lost their mystery. The tailor stitched suits, while upstairs recorded criminal calendars. A hidden wire finally cut through generations of practiced whispers. Frank Costello lived after a hit, then lost his throne. A bullet grazed power and rewrote New York's leadership quickly. In 1957, Vincent Gigante ambushed Frank Costello in Manhattan. Costello staggered into a lobby, bleeding but still conscious. He chose retirement over war, signaling a change to rivals. Vito Genovese pushed forward, consolidating influence across crews rapidly. The near miss moved mountains, without another shot being fired. Hospitals stitched skin. Back rooms stitched new arrangements quietly overnight. The shooter later mumbled confusion in court, but consequences stuck. Survival gave Costello life, not the chair he once held. Paul Castellano skipped Della Croce's funeral, alienated his own family. A missed funeral helped set a December ambush in motion. Paul Castellano avoided Aniello Della Croce's service, upsetting loyalists deeply. Tensions worsened around construction rackets and new leadership choices. John Gotti gathered allies from Queens to challenge direction. Outside Spark Steakhouse, gunmen struck in a winter rush. Headlines followed with photos, whispered names, and stunned passersby. Inside, crews recalculated loyalties, survival, and business territories overnight. Funeral etiquette turned into battlefield math for impatient captains. A small snub became the loudest message of that year. Joe Bonanno's tell-all memoir handed prosecutors a field day. A published memoir offered investigators a map with footnotes. Joe Bonanno released personal history describing years inside operations. Names, places, and sequences appeared without courtroom cross-examination available. Prosecutors compared passages against wiretaps, indictments, and old surveillances. Defense teams cringed, reading timelines matching their clients' habits. The book didn't convict. It clarified everything surrounding prosecutions. Readers found nostalgia. Investigators found corroboration and connective tissue. Autobiography met discovery, and discovery smiled back broadly afterward. Sometimes hardcovers carry more weight than courtroom objections combined. Frank "Lefty" Rosenthal's Stardust skim got caught by wiretaps. Casino glamour masked a cash river flowing off the books. Frank Rosenthal ran the Stardust and sister properties for years. Skimming involved envelopes leaving count rooms before official tallies. FBI microphones captured conversations about payroll, skim splits, and deliveries. After a car bombing, Rosenthal survived, rattled but still breathing. Investigators tied Chicago outfit bosses to Las Vegas cash. Teamsters' loan pipelines and casino fronts started unraveling quickly. Grand juries met quietly, while casino floors kept spinning. Bright lights couldn't hide the tape recorders behind ceiling tiles. Kansas City skim, exposed by hidden microphones in Vegas casinos. Backroom conversations in Missouri echoed loudly on the Strip. Kansas City bosses discussed shares from Las Vegas casino skims. Agents planted microphones in offices, cars, and meeting rooms. Names connected to Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Chicago appeared frequently. Recordings outlined routes for cash traveling far from cages. Indictments followed, roping in casino executives and union intermediaries. Court documents later matched whispers to exact withdrawals and deliveries. The skim that seemed invisible became a spreadsheet for prosecutors. Microphones turned neon fantasy into fluorescent deposition rooms overnight. Lucchese bosses Amuso and Casso launched paranoid purges. Imploded. Paranoia turned leadership into a self-inflicted demolition project quickly. Vic Amuso and Anthony Casso suspected leaks everywhere and everyone. They fled, issued orders from hiding, and demanded absolute obedience. Captains vanished, crews splintered, and street tax collection wobbled. Alphonse D'Arco later cooperated, describing meetings, murders, and chaos. Casso briefly cooperated too, then lost protection after misconduct. Amuso was captured. Stability never quite returned for years. The family's strength drained faster than rivals expected across boroughs. Fear kept secrets, but it also kept business painfully stopped. Philadelphia's Nicky Scarfo made enemies everywhere, and everyone eventually flipped. An iron-fisted reign produced more witnesses than soldiers eventually. In Philadelphia and Atlantic City, Nicky Scarfo ruled brutally. Ambitious nephews and hot tempers collided with casino expansion. Bombings, beatings, and taxes on everything bred constant resentment. Underboss Phil Leonetti eventually flipped, reshaping dozens of prosecutions. Rival factions welcomed indictments like overdue weather finally arriving. Juries learned more from relatives than surveillance ever captured before. The city's boardwalk glitz couldn't distract from courtroom dramas. A dynasty burned hot, then burned through its protective circle. Vincent Chin Gigante's Insanity Act collapsed. Obstruction conviction. Bathrobes and muttering gave way to a courtroom admission eventually. Vincent Gigante spent years appearing mentally unfit on Manhattan streets. Doctors, neighbors, and agents weighed whether the performance was genuine. After racketeering convictions, obstruction charges targeted the deception directly. He later acknowledged faking symptoms to avoid wiretaps and prosecutions. The Lower East Side routine finally collided with federal patience. Allies whispered admiration earlier. Afterward, they whispered caution instead. A legendary disguise couldn't outlast calendars and persistent investigators. The robe stayed famous. The defense strategy did not anymore.
De Cavalcante bosses bragger on tape about being the Sopranos. Fictional comparisons turned into evidence with a red light. In New Jersey, De Cavalcante members discussed television parallels proudly. Wiretaps caught boasting about crews, titles, and imagined storylines. Agents smiled, hearing metaphors become convenient identifications during playback. Surveillance later tied the chatter to extortion and gambling. Arrests followed, a case that practically wrote captions itself. Courtrooms heard scenes, then met the actors in person. Television hype became breadcrumbs leading straight to indictments. Sometimes art imitates life, then life imitates subpoenas afterward perfectly. Operation Oldbridge nabbed Gambinos after careless meetings and notes. International ties tightened and then snapped during one sweep. Operation Oldbridge targeted Gambino links between New York and Sicily. Agents documented meetings, coded notes, and travel that overlapped. Rivals sensed changes after earlier leadership shifts and arrests. The roundup reached crew bosses and overseas counterparts simultaneously. Phones, faxes, and face-to-face sit-downs all left trails. Court papers described cooperation crossing oceans and decades. Queens' social clubs suddenly felt smaller under that pressure. Bridges meant for business instead carried case files straight home. Chicago family secrets began when a son turned informant. A handwritten letter from prison changed Chicago forever afterward. Frank Calabrese Jr. offered to record his father covertly. Agents arranged hidden microphones and scheduled future yard conversations. Discussions covered murders, loan sharking, and the price of loyalty. Nicholas Calabrese later testified, anchoring timelines with specific details. The family secrets trial revisited cold cases and cemetery secrets. Jurors heard family voices discussing family business without euphemisms. Sentences stacked as Chicago's outfit lost its older guard. One envelope set everything in motion more effectively than violence. Corleonesi terror campaign sparked Pentiti flood and Maxi trial. Relentless killings in Sicily produced unexpected witnesses against killers. Under Toto Riina, Corleonesi targeted judges, rivals, and investigators. Tommaso Buscetta defected, describing the organization's hierarchy and methods. Giovanni Falcone built cases using detailed cooperation and financial tracking. In Palermo's courthouse bunker, the Maxi trial gathered defendants. Families, once united by fear, fractured under testimony and evidence. Bomb threats and intimidation failed to derail the proceedings. When verdicts arrived, exile replaced swagger across countryside strongholds. The campaign meant to silence, instead filled every courtroom microphone. Ignoring no drugs rule, heroin rings toppled entire families. A public rule against narcotics hit a private revenue engine. Crews swore off drugs publicly, then moved shipments quietly anyway. Pizza parlors, warehouses, and couriers linked continents and boroughs. Undercover buys, seizures, and ledgers dismantled networks piece by piece. Bosses claimed ignorance, but relatives talked about cash and deliveries. Trials labeled hypocrisy as motive for violence and betrayals. Cooperators described stash apartments and middlemen handling currency. The supposed line in sand washed away with profits. Declarations looked noble. Bank deposits told the real story instead. Sloppy garbage cartel meetings made easy work for FBI bugs. Trash routes led investigators straight to organized bid-rigging tables. In New York and New Jersey, carding executives divided territories. Diners and social clubs hosted predictable weekly sit-downs for schedules. Agents hid microphones near booths, capturing route swaps and payoffs.
Notes and envelopes changed hands while coffee refills kept coming. Prosecutors argued customers paid more while competition vanished completely. Indictments named haulers, brokers, and enforcers managing intimidation. When raids landed, dumpsters and offices spilled matching paperwork. The quiet racket grew loud once microphones met the menus. A boss trusted payphones, not realizing every line was tapped. Coins and dial tones felt safer than phones on desks. A New York boss used neighborhood payphones for sensitive conversations. Investigators deployed roving wiretaps, following him from booth to booth. Street noise and traffic couldn't hide names and instructions. Agents recorded meetings being scheduled in plain, impatient language. Logs matched the calls to surveillance photos near social clubs. Defense objections faltered because the warrants traveled legally alongside. The booth's scratched plexiglass became the case's clearest window. Old technology failed once the new paperwork moved faster ahead. Witness intimidation attempts recorded on wires, judges hit harder. Trying to scare witnesses only multiplied sentences at sentencing later. Threats over phones and hallways ended up on recordings. Agents documented calls, meetings, and coded warnings to families. Prosecutors presented transcripts showing pressure beyond the charged crimes. Judges considered obstruction enhancements and revoked earlier plea offers. Jurors heard fear in voices, then saw the tapes. Defense explanations collapsed when the same pattern repeated. Prison phones, visits, and letters became boomerangs for defendants. The louder the threats, the longer the final calendar became.